Michigan State University, and I'm happy to be here today. I'm happy to be here at this remarkable meeting dealing with protest, power, and progress, exploring black males across the lifespan. And it's wonderful to see a number of black males here today, some with their dad, some alone, but they're not really alone. We're all together. I want to begin by thanking Dr. Ted Ransall, Theodore Ransall, for organizing and putting the conference together. Let's give him a hand. And Dr. Ransall, if you can find a copy of the book, I'd like to have a copy in my hand as I do my introduction. I'd like to also thank my wife for coming. My wife is here, and she's been with me 62 years. And we dated for 2 years, so I've known her for 64 years. I want to say thank you to Dr. Chuck Rivers. Charles Rivers, is he here? If I might have stepped out, a remarkable young man who organized and runs the downtown Detroit MSU office. So we want to thank Chuck Rivers very much. Let's give it a big hand. And his wife, maybe 20 years. 40. 40? Oh my goodness. 40 years, Dr. June Rivers of the Detroit Public Schools. I also want to introduce to Detroit a very special young man. I call him young. He looks like he's about 30, but I think he's about 40. Dr. Khalid Moomin. Did I pronounce it right? Of the Reading Public Schools in Reading, Pennsylvania. And his wife, who's here, I think, was born, been raised in Detroit and went to school here. And they met and got married, and they're just a wonderful couple. And he's doing a remarkable job in Reading, Pennsylvania as superintendent. I've heard him speak many times. Then I'm going to thank the artists who stand up, Dr. Khalid. Give him a big hand. By the way, he wrote a book, Against the Odds. It's being published, being edited now, and it will be published by the Michigan State University Press. And we hope it will be out next spring. So we want to thank you so much. And he's going to be on a panel, I believe, later on today.
Thank you.
So I want to thank all of you. Thank the young men who are here. And again, let me tell you why this meeting is so important. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Ransall, my wife, joined me and myself. We went to a mass incarceration conference. And it had quite an impact on me. It had an impact on me for the following reason. When I was a graduate student at San Francisco State College, I had many jobs. And when jobs interfered with my coursework, I quit the job and got another job. The job was not the important thing. The important thing was getting my master's degree so I can get out of California, get up to Michigan State, East Lansing. One of the jobs I had was that of a prison guard. I worked as a prison guard at San Quentin Prison for several months. And I saw the horrors of prison life. But there were some things I didn't see, but I learned at this conference. For example, there's a young man by the name of Johnny Perez, who's an expert on solitary confinement. You know, when a man, and you can end up in solitary confinement if a guard doesn't like you. If he doesn't like the way you look, if he doesn't like the way you speak, if he doesn't like the way you're acting, they're going to assign you to solitary confinement, a low room where you spend 24, sometimes 24 hours a day. No conversation. Johnny Perez told the story of the guard who brought his food to him 6 days a week. And he would shove it into him very gently. He said if the guard was in a bad mood and didn't like him, he would shove it in real fast and the food would fall on the floor, and he would have to get down, boys, on the floor and eat the food. The guard wouldn't speak to him. He said he had not heard a human voice for about 4 or 5 months. And he wanted to hear a human voice so bad, he said, I know how I can make that guard speak to me. So Alex Hosey, you know what he did? When the guard brought his food in the next day, he called the guard, you know what the SOB is, I won't say the word. He called him an SOB, MF, he just called him a bunch of names, and the guard was shocked. He looked at it, and the guard started calling him names. He said he was so glad to hear the guard's voice that the name sounded good. Star for communication, star for contact. So young people, boys, I'm so happy to see you here. I met young men, Dr. Ted Ranshaw and myself. Met one young man, good-looking kid, wasn't quite 30 years of age. Dr. Newman has spent 16 years in a federal prison, third-time offender. So when he told me, Dr. Rivers, that he had spent 15 years in a federal prison, I said, how many people did you kill? He said, none. 3 times theft. Theft, a nonviolent crime, spent 16 years in prison. That's why it's so, this conference, protest. We're protesting that. We're protesting that. That should not happen in America today. Yeah. I want you to also know Dr. Ranshaw has data, and probably some of the data is in this wonderful book. I hope you can get a good shot. Dr. Rivers, can we get a good shot of this book?
We got you right here, sir.
You got it? Okay. You know, when I see that happening to our young men, I said, that has to stop. It has to stop at pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, first, and second, and third grade. I'm working with an 8-year-old boy now. I won't call his name. I'll call him X. He wants to fight all the time. I saw him just 4 days ago in the principal's office. If he doesn't like the way a kid looks, Mr. Superintendent, pop, he'll pop him, knock him down. And I said, wait a minute, you can't do that. He said, well, my daddy said, if somebody hit me and I don't hit him back, I'm a chump. And I don't want to be a chump. I said, wait a minute. I said, you like Mayweather, don't you? I said, Mayweather, when he hits somebody, he what? He gets paid. He makes money. Makes a lot of money. He walks around with a sack full of money, I kid you not, in Las Vegas. And I said, isn't he afraid? And then I look at those guys around him and I see why he's not afraid. Yeah, his guy's bigger than you around. Bigger than Khalid. So I said, but when you hit somebody, you get in trouble. I said, don't hit people. I said, one day you're going to hit somebody that's going to be the wrong person. They might have a daddy or a big brother or an uncle. Handle things, as Martin Luther King Jr. would say, in a non-violent, peaceful way. So young men, I'm so happy to see, Alex, I'm really happy to see you. I've heard a lot about you. And Alex's dad, Sam Hosey, I've heard a lot about you. And you got a good role model in Dr. Ted Ranshaw. Dr. Ranshaw is a scholar. He can write, he can teach, and students respect him. And I use that as a standard. When I meet young men and women on a college or university faculty like Michigan State, a huge, big place, and students respect them and care for them, that says a lot to me. So let's give Dr. Ranshaw a hand. Also, I mentioned June Green Rivers, the wife of Chuck Rivers, but the young lady, Khalid, your wife's first name is?
Latrice.
Latrice. Yes. Latrice. She's, I think, a literacy expert, right? Are you a reading expert? Anyway, you talk. You work with June Rivers. She worked to keep young men in school. Dr. Rivers worked to keep young men in school. We all want you to stay in school and do well. I've been blessed with 3 sons. I've got a lawyer, an engineer, and a finance guy. And so far, I've been blessed. They've not caused me any trouble, and I thank them. My middle son, Kurt, said to me the other day, he said, Daddy, you owe us. I said, I owe you. I said, I paid for your undergrad and your MBA. What? He said, you never had to get me out of jail. I said, you better not. I said, you may be 60, but I can still pamper you. No, seriously speaking. So young men, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Stay in school. Do a good job in school. Listen to your teachers. I'm going to tell you something. Teachers may not always be right. Sometimes they slip and make a mistake or two. And I've heard our superintendent from Reading, Pennsylvania, Dr. Moomin, speak to a group of teachers and counselors last week. But they might know a little more than we know at our age, at our young age. Listen to your teachers. Secondly, listen to your parents. Listen to your how many of you have grandparents that are alive? Hold your hands up. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Listen to your grandparents. We're old, but we know a little bit. I'm old. And sometimes there's an advantage to being old. I was in Johannesburg, South Africa, and my wife's luggage was so heavy, my luggage was heavy, and I said, oh, Sam, I grabbed it. I said, oh, I'm old. And there were 2 young black guys in their 20s. They grabbed our bags and carried our bags from Johannesburg to Durban to Sun City. So there are some perks for being old. But there are a few. So again, we're welcoming you all here, and our artist. I think he needs to stand. Let's give our artist a hand. He hasn't said anything about a discount because his wife is back there. But are the pictures for sale? And he said they're for sale. And we want to thank all of you for being here. And Dr. Ransall, again, thank you for putting this together. This is just the first one. We're going to do it again. And it's going to be even larger, and it's going to grow. And I see one of my former students coming in here. Let's give him a hand. He's late, but he's late. You know, one of the advantages of being old, see, Alex, I know you think I'm young. You think about 60? No? Alex, I will be 85 years of age on November 23rd. You one day will be 85 years of age, and you will have a track record behind you. You will continue to do good things because you were being raised by Sam Hosey, and he's doing a good job. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of all the young people. Brother Johnson, I'm proud of you. He hasn't given me a smile yet, but he'll smile. Look at it, he smiled. He's hard to crack a smile. But we thank all of you for being here today. And you're going to hear from the superintendent of schools. We have a real live superintendent of schools from Reading, Pennsylvania, not too far from Chester, right? Where Martin Luther King Jr. Spent some time. And Coretta Scott King's sister was raised in Chester, Pennsylvania. So you're from a great area, and we love you. We're happy that you're here, and he's doing a good job. If you all want a great superintendent, when this vacancy opens up here, bring him from Pennsylvania. You have a guy. He holds high expectations for student achievement. He loves young people, and he can provide good leadership for black males. So when Detroit opens up, you're leaving Reading, we won't bring you here. Take care. Thank you so much, Dr. Ransall.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ted Ransall. I am the coordinator of the Handbook of Research on Black Males. That is the volume that you see right here. It is 753 pages. There are 6 sections, and I am the, as you say, I'm kind of like the co-editor. Dr. Green is the executive editor. The other co-editor is CP Guys, Dr. CP Guys. So later on this evening, we'll have a book discussion. But today, you don't want to hear a bunch of book talk. You don't want to hear a bunch of stuff from me. Right? What we're going to do is we're going to bring out 2 amazing young males to give us a little overview for the rest of the day, and then we're going to have breakout sessions. Right? So we'll have the young folks, we're going to bring young folks towards the back, and then I will let you decide what means young to you, so whatever you would like to go with. So the young folks, we're going to do kind of a workshop activity, and for the folks who are not as young, maybe just a little bit older, right, we're going to do another workshop, right? So I'll introduce the folks for the workshop in a few moments, but right now I would like to introduce one of the most amazing men that I've met in a long time. If I had a daughter, this guy would be the guy that I would approve of. I don't have one yet, but so you can think about it in the future. Maybe 21 years from now, if I start tomorrow, we can go back to that. So I'll let the gentleman talk about himself, and I want to share a little bit with you just a moment about connections, and that's why we're here. And so what I'm most happy about is everyone that has come today actually volunteered to come, to participate. We have folks come all the way from all across the country just here for this event, so I really appreciate that, one. But that has to do with community and connection, and what would happen if we did this as a collective people more often and did something to support ourselves. How different would things be, right? So I would like for you to keep that in the back of your head. Well, a long time ago, I would say maybe about 47, 43 years ago, in Lansing, Michigan, there was a young man who wound up being a principal. This young man who wound up being a principal was mentored a little bit by Dr. Green. So here we are here in 2018. That principal is a principal at East Lansing High School, and that principal also has turned around and supported another young black man, Alex Hosey from East Lansing High School. So isn't that an amazing connection? Amen. Small connections, you can have big impact. So without further ado, this gentleman can talk about himself and all the things he's done on his own. Here we have Alex Hosey. Let's give him a round of applause.
Okay. Good afternoon. First, I would like to thank Dr. Ted Ransaw and Dr. Robert Green and the Michigan State University for the invitation and this opportunity to share with you all. It's an honor to share this stage with so many great people, and I'm grateful just to be here. To all the other speakers and distinguished guests throughout the day, I'd like to express my warmest greetings. To all the mentors and adults in the room, I would like to say hello and respect. And to my fellow high school and middle school peers, I'd like to say, what's good? I just want to spend a few minutes talking about activism from my perspective. Your journey might not be the same as mine, but we can all make a difference. Last year, I protested racial injustice by sitting during the national anthem at my freshman basketball game. No big deal, right? I sat because I was bothered and frustrated enough to want to say something about everything that was going on. The killing of unarmed black men and women, the excuses for officers responsible, the unequal education made available to students just because of the neighborhood kids lived in, the president and his supporters disrespecting black athletes, black women and his predecessor, the first black president, and so on. I was done being a sheep and following the herd. But it was crazy though, because some of my friends at Lansing Catholic had protested the anthem during their football games, and they were benched, threatened with suspension, and one even lost their scholarship offer. So yeah, I was a little scared and nervous, but I had made up my mind and I had sat. I didn't tell my parents or anything, I just sat because I was upset. After my first game of protesting, my coach met with my parents and I talked about it, and we talked about it. It wasn't too, my coach wasn't too upset, I guess. I mean, he looked at me like, when I sat, he looked at me like, what are you doing? Like, but then after, he was more calm, and he just had a lot of questions. He wanted to understand why I was protesting. I explained the best way that I could at the time, but my father told me that if I was going to do this, then I had better be able to speak to it and have facts to back it up. So that's my message today. Find something you believe in, stand up, and fight for it. It's not saying to go around boxing people. I mean, like, what is that going to do to somebody like the president? Like, I'm saying it's a fight with your mind. Get the facts around your cause. I was annoyed with a bunch of things, but my parents told me to focus on a few things in my community that I could impact. Yes, I was annoyed with some of the rhetoric and things that the president was saying, but my platform was a little too small to impact him. There's an old saying my great-grandmother used to say, your arms are too short to box with God. So in this case, I couldn't box with the politicians in Washington, but back home in East Lansing, I thought I had a chance. So I wrote an article, or an essay if you will, about the history of racial injustice in East Lansing. Dr. Robert Green and his wife were the first blacks to own a house in East Lansing in the mid-60s. My grandparents were among the first when they bought their house in 1969. But somehow, no one seemed to remember that it was legal to keep blacks out of the city. This impacted our ability to own good houses and send our kids to good schools and live in safer neighborhoods. So I wrote about this and asked the mayor of East Lansing to apologize. I also asked for the school district to teach this history. I've asked them to teach about Malcolm X, who grew up in Lansing, and how his family was kicked out of their house and their house was burned to the ground when he was a boy. I wanted this history to be taught. That became my fight and my cause. So in February of this year, Mayor Mark Meadows of the city passed a resolution apologizing for discrimination. And this summer, I met with our school district's social studies chair to share recommendations for curriculum updates. We emailed my essay to my coach, who sent it to city council members, and in a week, my essay was at the mayor's desk. A month later, my parents and I were in his office discussing how the apology would even take place. There was no debate over what I was asking for. They couldn't argue with facts and history. So in my fight, I found a new appreciation in finding and uncovering evidence, facts in our history, good and bad. These things were my ammunition, not my fists. They also couldn't argue when the story got into the media, which is another powerful vehicle in activism. Don't we have now today we have activism and traditional journalism as powerful tools. Phone calls to newspapers, TV stations, bloggers, and whoever can bring attention to your cause. In my case, my father used to work as a freelance journalist, and knowing how papers worked, all he had to do was send an email to a local journalist, and he did the rest. He called the mayor, called the city council members, and that was it. Since that time, I've been more active in our school's Black Student Union. I participated in the March for Our Lives to bring attention to gun control, and lately I've been focusing on the Michigan Department of Education attempt to strip our social studies curriculum. Real quick, the state of Michigan's Department of Education has quietly been recommending that we change our social studies curriculum to remove items from our history books. Things like the March on Washington, the KKK, the NAACP, the Little Rock Nine, and so much more. There are legislators behind this, and it's been happening for several years now. I'm writing our lawmakers, but there's an example of another cause that's worth fighting for. So even though all of this activism work takes time, I still balance it out with regular kid stuff. I was starting running back and cornerback on my JV football team that went 8-1 this year. I'm on the hoop squad again this year, and I will run track this spring. I still love the Lions, even though they suck. College football, the NBA, and shows like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto. I still stay up late to make sure my grades are right, and that's another thing. Grades are like the key to unlocking all of this. My father told me that if I had protested and I had a 1.0 GPA, my demonstration and essay probably wouldn't have had as much respect as it did. That meant I had to be on point in the classroom and on the court. If I had been cut from the team, then I wouldn't have even been able to protest. I had to make the team, so I had to put in gym time too. It's all a juggling act. Grades, activism, character, gym time, and chilling at the crib. So in closing, I will leave you with these things. 1, find something you are passionate about and believe in, because if you don't, then anybody can sniff out that you're fake. Number 2, read about it and get all the facts. Research about your topic and interest and find undisputable facts and evidence so that you can navigate in a discussion with intelligence. 3, get some support if you can. Friends, family, teachers, etc. 4, peacefully protest and be prepared with your facts. You have to be able to not only learn the facts, but express them so that everyone can understand it. 5, media. Get involved on social media with journalists or even TV if you can. Just try and expand your message as far as you can. 6, character. Get good grades and stay out of trouble, because credibility is everything. Being known as the kid that goes to the office a lot or doesn't care about school is not something that would help your cause. Alexander Hamilton, who is on our $10 bill, is credited as saying, "Those who stand for nothing fall for anything." So please, stand up for something and get involved. Thank you.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Appreciate it.
Phenomenal.
All right, see? Told you.
Out of the mouth of babes. Wow.
Young black men, now I am confident in the future. There's another black male that I'm confident about the future with. One of the issues surrounding black men we know is issues in school, issues with the police. We'll be talking about that throughout the day. And you may have heard some of the solutions have been rites of passage, and or some of the solutions may be mentorship programs. And some people call their mentorship program rites of passage. Technically speaking, mentorship doesn't start till after the rites of passage is finished, right? Because remember the hoodwink, right? You're hoodwink, you're taken from the group, the village. Then you go through your training, it's like a boot camp. And then you're accepted back into the village, and that's when you get your mentor, right? So that's one of the small things that bothers me about mentorship, which we call their mentorship rites of passage. I am fully in support of mentorship programs as well as rites of passage, but if we're going to do an ethnic and historical tradition, we need to be in connection with that tradition and truth. The other thing that concerns me about mentorship programs, and I'm all for mentorship programs, and I think everyone has heard of someone who's had a mentorship program, but how often have you heard someone who has a mentorship program that actually has assessments and measurements and things written down? Most mentorship programs, people just show up, what did you guys talk about? Oh, we just talked. So we talked about hygiene, we talked about girls and police. Okay, so how often? Well, what do you mean? So I applaud anyone who does a mentorship program and tries to advance things. But I think mentorship programs might be just a little bit better if you have a plan before you start. And while you're doing your mentorship program, you have some ideas or some goals. Goal 1, increase attendance, decrease absences. 2, increase grade level. 3, have open communication X amount of times. I think those are some things that you can measure over a period of time that I think can support mentorship programs. And so here I am, concerned about mentorship programs and black males, and I come across the name of a guy named Tim Hurd, who is a young man. He is a MSU, Michigan State University senior, who's been doing his mentorship program on his own. Then he got adopted by some faculty at MSU and gave him support. But this young man on his own did a mentorship program to support black males, a young black male supporting other black males of his peer age, and he has measurements and assessments. That's amazing. I've never heard anyone who was that young, that polished, with that much stuff together. So without further ado, because you don't want to hear a bunch of old folks today, trust me, we will break out in our session and do some fun things very, very soon. But we're going to also have some fun things right now where we have Tim Hurd talk about Michigan State University, his mentorship, and his thoughts about education and higher ed. Come on down.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Tim Hurd. I am a senior at Michigan State University. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Ted Renshaw for having me here. Thank you, Dr. Green, for your forward word. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of information about myself and then about my organization. So now I'm a senior at Michigan State University. When I came in freshman year, so I was an athlete. So I was a basketball player, so I played on the basketball team. I'm originally from Detroit, but I moved to Grosse Pointe, which goes into the pretext of why I'm saying this. So I'm from I'm from Detroit, but in 5th grade I moved to Grosse Pointe, and it was kind of like, it's kind of similar to East Lansing where I'm at right now. It's predominantly white, and there was this culture shock that I had when I got to Grosse Pointe. But it kind of helped me become better equipped for when I got to Michigan State University. So when I got to Michigan State University, I played basketball for half the first year, and then I stopped playing basketball. And I started focusing on my grades because I was always a student athlete. The student came first and the athlete came second. And that was something I wanted to emphasize, and my grades started going low. So the minute my grades started dipping a little bit, I was like, all right, I need to switch it up. So I got more into the academics. And second semester of my freshman year, I was just in the library every day just studying. And I lived in Acres, so I had 3 roommates, and they were my best friends, and they were also young black men. And after freshman year, they all got kicked out, and they all had 0.0s. And myself, I had a 3.7, but it was kind of hard just because like those are my three best friends, like those are my guys. So I was like, what can I do to kind of find a solution? What can I do to fix this? And then I just came across some wonderful people within the College of Education, because that's where I'm at. And I started working with some faculty there, like Dr. Gunnings, Moden, who's the Associate Dean of College of Education. She's like my mother there. And she just introduced me to a cohort of young black professionals, and I didn't really see that. I'd never been around a lot of black people who had their doctorate degrees or PhDs and things like that. So for that was just a new experience. And then they introduced me to like this topic of research. So I was like, okay, let me start seeing what this is, because research never really interested me before. I was just kind of like, it's just like a lot of reading, a lot of writing, stuff that I wouldn't really be intrigued with, but I was. And I realized that through research, it provides a level of like validity in terms of what you're saying, because you're like, well, the research backs this up. So people have to start taking you serious a little bit. So I started to get into research, and over the summer of my freshman year, I was a summer RA, and I had a cohort of students who were coming in, and there was 12 black students who I was specifically focusing on. And I started doing research with one of my mentors, and it was understanding students of color expectations as they transition to a predominantly white institute. Because a lot of my students, or the freshmen who were coming in, were from Detroit, so they're really from Cass and Renaissance. And one of the things I wanted to see if they had this self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. So speaking into existence of, oh, I'm coming to Michigan State, but I'm not going to make it because of my background or where I was going through. And that was something that I didn't like, because a lot of them who I was working with, I saw that they had this problem. So I was like, all right, I need to do something. So I did various leadership positions, and through the leadership positions, I realized there was a lack of black male representation in leadership positions on campus, and that was something that I wanted to change. So through research and doing other research projects, I created my organization. It's called Rising Black Men, and I started it last year, September 17th. And now we have over 100 black men in my organization, and the retention rate was 100%. That was cool, but it started off, I guess the breakdown of it. So there was 35 freshmen, because my target group was freshmen, freshman black males. We had 35 freshmen, we had 7 upperclassmen, so juniors and seniors, and then we had 15 graduate students who were black men as well. And this was at the start, so this was by October of last year. And the ratio, so we checked in and saw how they were doing. There was 1 mentor to 5 mentees. So that's 7 to 35. And we saw they were doing academically and socially. We checked in with them at least twice a week. And then every other Friday in Brody, which is one of the dorms on campus, we have learning objectives. So we have these conversations that we might not have elsewhere. So we have conversations such as, like our first conversation was how to navigate a predominantly white institute while being a black male and deal with things such as microaggressions. And then a lot of my guys are from Detroit, so there's crab in the barrel effect, and there's a divisiveness that we have within our own city, like East Side versus West Side, or Mac versus Warren, and stuff like that. And being familiar with things like that. And so when guys come up to campus, they might limit themselves and they might not interact with people. And I think that the 2 things that I emphasize are increasing people's social capital and then also doing well academically. The first piece is academically. So I want my guys to